Good afternoon and good morning for those, depending on where your time zone is. Thanks for joining us today on our training sessions on IFRA 52nd Amendment. I'm Penny Williams and I'll be conducting the training today. The first half of the session is going to be about the consultation itself and a brief sort of like capture of what's in it and really what we know so far. And the second part will be showing where Formpak's up to with the implementation of it. So where we're at is that IFRA 52nd is in the formal consultation process, and I know this was only done in December, so the 12th of December is when it opened, obviously just before Christmas, and I know that not everyone will have had a chance to look at it yet. It's a 6-month consultation window, and so that closes on the 12th of June. To access the consultation, if you click on the link that came around via IFRA UK or other IFRA organisations, if you click on it, it will actually take you to the SharePoint. So you click on the SharePoint link and then you can see all of the information regarding the individual standards here, but also guidance for the use of the standards, the template for comments, certificate of conformity examples, and if there's any one thing that you read, the consultation letter itself is a really good summary. So obviously we'll cover quite a bit today, but the consultation letter is a great summary of what's going on. So in that amendment package, we've got the updated guidance for the use of IFRA standards, then individual IFRA standards, which are 51 new standards, 18 modified standards, and 6 admin updates. And with regard to the comments template, if you do sort of have a good look around, if you've got any comments that you want to make about it, you can use the comments template to send information back to IFRA to have them consider your comments. And through that process, then afterwards there will be a period of time where IFRA collate the comments, decide if there's anything that materially needs to change before issuing the publication, which will be due at the end of this year. So in the amendment package as well, there is an annex of contributions from other sources and the Excel overview of affected standards. Both of those are for information only, rather than specifically needing to be consulted on, but they're a helpful resource so you can see some of the impact. So of the 51 new standards, 40 of them address potential dermal sensitization effects with additional evaluation of systemic toxicity endpoints. So these are the 40 standards that meet that criteria, and just the names of them are here, but in italics, I've also put some of the common trade names just so that you can kind of see a bit more easily which materials are affected. And as you can see, there are some very common materials there, even things like phenylethyl alcohol, for example, and obviously herbanalide, globalide. They're materials used in significant concentrations and across lots of products. So people's products are likely to be affected by these new standards. And then there's 11 of the new standards which are dermal sensitization effects only, so QRA2 only, and those materials are here as well. And again, some quite common materials here. In regards to the modified standard, then we've got musc-ketone has been modified. So previously it was a specification standard only, and now it's also has restrictions. There's also, in the opposite way around, we have acetylated vetiver oil, or AVO, as it's sometimes termed. That was just a restriction standard previously, and now that's also got a specification. So that specification is that 1% alpha tocopherol should be added at the time of production. And that actually relates to an SCCS opinion on AVO, where alpha tocopherol was used and made part of the opinion. So that's also expected to make its way into the EU cosmetics regulation. Now, the other one on the end here is a renaming of a previous standard. So the citrus oils and other furocoumarin containing essential oils standard has been renamed to furocoumarins in natural complex substances, and there's quite a few effects of that. So we'll be speaking more about that specifically. In terms of the modified standards, so periodically in relation to new data, RIFM may undertake new safety assessments, and that may result in revisions to standards. And so this time around, there's 15 that meet that criteria. And again, you can see there's some quite important materials there, but they are already limited, and now they have some different limits. Sometimes they may go up and sometimes they may down, so it may go down. So it's not a bad news story necessarily, because they can go in both directions. And then in relation to the last few, so we've got 6 where there are minor updates to existing standards where they have had the generic CAS number added. So previously they just had one CAS number, and now they've got 2 because of the generic CAS number also being added. And this isn't, these are not subject to an implementation timeline, and that's because with most standards, they say that the scope includes, but is not limited to, the CAS numbers indicated, and that any other CAS numbers used to identify the ingredient should also be considered in scope. So the addition of these CAS numbers is a clarification point, not actually a modification in the scope. So they are just applicable straight away as a clarification. And one additional thing on the annex of other sources, to sort of highlight that the annex is intended to be used only when one's own analytical data or reliable supplier data is not available, and your analytically determined levels shall take precedence. So, for example, through your own analysis or through supply chain information, the data about your specific quality of oil is a higher authority than data that's in the annex of other sources, which is a reference document. Now, it is tremendously useful, and there are many NCS listed, and there's one of them on the screen here where you can see for lemon oil expressed, it has a combination of previously limited materials like geraniol and nerol, and then newly limited materials, nerol acetate and geranol acetate, as well as some of those furocoumarins. So you can see the concentrations there of the IFRA limited substances in this, peer-reviewed quality of this material. I just want to show that document briefly. So this is directly from the consultation area, and you can see there's the caveats as to how to use this information, and then there's very many ingredients in here and lots of IFRA limited materials. So you can navigate through this to add to your own data and know how you're affected. Now, there are some changes of particular note, and these changes are called out in the notification letter. So again, a really good resource to have a review. And there could be things that I'm not talking about that may be more impactful to you. So, so please do also read that letter. But with Reed Diffuser, there's a change in category from 10A to 10B, and that followed review of category 10 in relation to Reed Diffusers, which it better reflects the mode of use because the fragrance is primarily released into the air. 10A was household care products with mostly hand contact. That was what it was up to now, and it's now 10B, which is household care products with mostly hand contact, but including aerosol spray products with potential leave-on skin contact. And that potential leave-on skin contact shifts it from a phototoxicity perspective into a leave-on consideration. Now, the furocoumarin standard, so this is the one previously entitled Citrus Oils and Other Furocoumarin Containing Essential Oils, having been renamed to Furocoumarins in Natural Complex Substances. Now, the standard lists the CAS numbers of the 8 furocoumarins identified as adequate markers for determining the total FC content. So those are on the screen here. There are more than 8 furocoumarins, but there's been a lot of study over a long period of time, and these 8 are the ones that are the most likely to be seen and also therefore adequate markers for determining the total furocoumarin content level. The total level of furocoumarins has to be considered, and the limit applies to the total, not to each one individually. So there's just please be aware of that aspect. I wanted to show you the furocoumarin standard just because it is different to other standards. So there's a couple of things that are different. One thing that's quite critically different. So the CAS numbers at the front are bolded, and there's a note to say that the CAS number in bold is the generic CAS number, and a very similar statement as in other standards that the CAS numbers, if there are other CAS numbers used to identify these markers, that they should be considered in scope as well. And then lots of different names by which these markers are known. A note to explain the renaming of the standard. And then a table that looks very familiar. It's actually very similar to the citrus oils standard, but the concentrations are different. So there's a 5 ppm for leave on and a 50 ppm for rinse off as a limit. And the critical change is captured in the note box. So this is that there is a 1 ppm limit which applies to sunscreen products and other leave-on products specifically marketed for exposure to natural or artificial UV light, and in existing regulations often referred to as sun protection and bronzing products. And the circumstances when this 1 ppm limit applies is either visible from the product presentation or by claiming an SPF, so a sun protection factor, on the product itself. So that is a significant change in sort of like structurally for the IFRA standards. So as a summary of that, total furocoumarins are limited to 0.0005% in leave-on products, 0.005% in rinse-off products, 0.0001% in sunscreen products. So the knock-on effect is that there's another set of calculations to be performed for this 1 ppm section. So what's captured in the table is very normal. What's captured in the notes is where there's a difference in terms of calculation. Now, there was a webinar in November preparing for IFRA's revised policy on furocoumarins, and slides are available on the IFRA website. So if you search there, you'll find that that detail, because there's obviously awareness that this is a change. So one of the knock-on effects of this as well is to remove the standards for several NCS with known potential FC presence. So what happens with the 52nd is that the standards for those materials, so angelica root, bergamot, bitter orange, cumin, grapefruit, lemon, lime, and rue, all of those are removed because the furocoumarin levels are available where present in the annex of other sources, and also the levels can be determined through your supply chain or through your own analysis. Now, because there are now this other set of data that only applies if it's a sun protection product, there is these other calculations and also an impact on the IFRA certificate itself. So in the consultation documents, there are 2 examples that IFRA have shared of IFRA conformity certificates, and they do make it clear that these are, informational. They are suggestions of format. The critical thing is the data itself. The format is more open. So the suggestions that they have given are one where the impact of the 1 ppm for sunscreen products is shown in a new column, and the other one is where they're just shown interleaved. So both category 1s, one after each other, and then category 2s, one after each other. So there's options as to preference here, and the key thing is to get the data in. From an impact analysis perspective, lots of these things are the normal impacts that we would expect. So additional data may be needed via analysis or from the supply chain. For example, levels of newly restricted components in NCS or third-party bases. Changes in restrictions, of course, and new restrictions may trigger compliance-based formulation rework, and also changes in placement of applications, for example, reed diffusers. That change within IFRA categories will need review. What's additional is that due to the sun protection limits for furocoumarins, additional calculations are required to determine limits and the revision in IFRA certificate formats. From a timing point of view, due to the impact of the furocoumarin standard on computer systems, an additional 2 months has been added to the preparatory stage, which means there's 11 months after the date of the notification that new creations need to comply with the 52nd Amendment, and it's 30 months after the date of notification for standards for existing creations. Now, on to what's happening Formpak side. We are enabling the IFRA 52nd data to be in place concurrently with the as now IFRA 51st data. So that means that you'll be able to calculate and check compliance for both IFRA 51 and IFRA 52 in the same time frame, and produce certificates for both scenarios as well in the same time frame. Now, to allow for that independence, an additional data set and set of properties are required, and I'll show you how we've configured that in a moment. So new properties representing the 52nd data points are available. And again, we'll see that in a minute. And also an additional standard format of the IFRA certificate with components. We've already done that work. On the data itself, so the limited components, we don't have a full data set of that available yet because there is the potential for it to change through the consultation process. But once it is published, we will then work on that data, which means it can be referenced through a matching process, and if you want to add that data en masse, we can assist with that process. However, you can manually enter the data. There are obviously the 52 plus the 16. It's not a huge amount of data, but obviously it's quite a lot of typing, and so it's entirely up to you as to when you start putting that data in. Now, the next part of the session will be a demonstration of IFRA 52nd in Formpak, and we will view a raw material for lemon oil. we'll look at the composition and the properties for IFRA current and IFRA new, and then we'll look at a formulation that contains lemon oil and look again at the composition and the properties, and we'll print some IFRA certificates so that you can see how we've approached that. So here we are in Formpak, and just before we dive in to look at the lemon oil, just would like to show you that we've got a new support center. It has a virtual agent which makes navigating and finding things a bit easier, but it's broadly very similar to the previous one, but more responsive, I'll say, and easier to get information out of. So if we look at the lemon oil, go into the property groups. Obviously for Formpak users, this should be quite familiar. Yeah, this screen seems to have frozen. So IFRA 49 categories. So this is obviously what everybody would be looking at if they were looking today. Please note that the approach that we've taken for this sort of session is we've used the current 2% limit as if it was directly from the lemon oil IFRA standard, rather than using a calculated version based on the level of 5 MOP in there. So it's got 2% as a limit, kind of looking at the now situation. And if we look then at the 2026 categories, it's now got it's a calculated limit based on the total of the furocoumarins. So it's quite a difference. And if you also notice that we've got this duplicate set of properties. So in the normal set, it's just IFRA CA01 for category 1. And we've got this duplicate set now, which is the IFRA 26 category 1 limit. And that's duplicated all the way to 12. And then we have a whole new set of properties which relate to the SPF, the sun protection factor limit. So this is taken into account the 1 ppm limit of the total furocoumarins. Whereas if we scroll up, you can see these are the impacts of the 5 and the 50 ppm limits. If we look at the composition, you can also see we have, so there's the impact of I've put category 4 in columns here, so I've customized the screen to show these two columns so that you can see side by side. So 7-methoxycoumarin, for example, is limited in the same way in both IFRA current and IFRA new, and so it's got the same limit. The same with citronellal. So again, so the information gets duplicated. And then the furocoumarins are where there's a departure, because they're now limited, because all 8 markers are limited. And we also, you can see where there are new ones. So we've got things like neryl acetate and geranyl acetate are limited in IFRA 52, but are not limited right now. So you have these two parallel systems, but one that's reflecting IFRA up to IFRA 51, and then one that's reflecting IFRA 52. Now, if we go and have a look at a formulation, containing this. So we've got into train. Let me type correctly. Into train. And we can look at the composition of the formulation. And similarly, I have elected to put the IFRA category 4 current and the IFRA category 4 under the IFRA 52nd amendment next to each other. I've also done the same actually up here. I don't know if people are aware of this. You can call out properties to show for the formulation there as well. So quite a short formulation, obviously not typical. A fragrance formulation is obviously much longer than this usually, but you can see again that there is materials that are limited in both current IFRA standards and in the IFRA 52nd standards, and you can see where there is a difference. And here you can see that the lemon oil expressed is quite different for the reasons we've already discussed. And now on to the certificates themselves. So the IFRA certificate that people are familiar with, if we print that, so you can see the IFRA standard limits based on IFRA 51. And although it says not approved here, again, most people who are using Formpak understand that category 1 and category 6 requires the flavour them to be flavour safe as well, and that's not established for this particular fragrance, hence it says it's not approved. But obviously that's just an additional criteria. So you can see the IFRA limits across the 12 categories under the old or current IFRA standards. And then we can also look at the new style IFRA FC certificate with components. We can preview that. And we have the way we've approached this is we've gone down a 2-column method, as you can see, and this is the impact of the new standards for that particular formulation, which includes the furocoumarins, and then here where it is impacted further because of the 1 ppm limit. So you can see that there's some where there's quite a difference and others where there's less of a difference. So it does very much depend on the application. And also the components listed in a way that you would expect based on which materials have been limited. So that's kind of where we're up to directly in the system and with the work we've done so far. And then coming back to what's next. After the publication of the 52nd Amendment, we will adopt any of the changes and finalise the IFRA certificate format. We're not expecting it the IFRA certificate format to really be impacted, but any of the changes that do materially change anything we will implement. And we'll also implement a loadable set of ingredients with the IFRA 52nd limits, which can optionally be used in a matching process to streamline you getting the data in. Then from a user perspective, you can receive a system update with the 2026 property group, the properties, the applications, and also the IFRA certificates themselves. And then you can update the ingredients to add the new and revised limits, and you can do that either manually or using the matching service. And one of the things for those people who are using suitability checks, to determine compliance. You can update the applications, your real life applications, to add the new IFRA categories at a point that's appropriate for your business. And we can assist with that by using analysis and import the equivalent applications against those applications for you. There may be an interim period where you want to, almost on an ad hoc basis, use your current check and supplement it on an ad hoc, case by case, with applications for the IFRA 52nd. So there is another area as well. There are some people who have customized IFRA and cosmetic jointly IFRA and cosmetic data in one style of certificate, because now IFRA is using, has this extra set of criteria because of the IFRA furukumarin limit at 1 ppm. That there will be some sort of decisions for people to make about how they want the data to then be integrated within their customized documentation. Thank you everyone for attending today.